In this tutorial, we're going to talk about how you can adjust the window when you've graphed something and you can't quite get a good idea of what this graph looks like. So here I have in my y equals x cubed minus 43x plus 42. So say I hit graph on this, and I see 3 lines, but that doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. I can see they're slanted a little bit, so they will eventually connect, but I want to see exactly what this graph looks like. So that means I'm going to have to adjust the window. Now, how do you go about adjusting the window? Now, there are a couple of ways of adjusting the window. A lot of them can be found through the zoom menu. So if you click on zoom, this brings you a number of different options. So first, you'll see here we have zoom in and zoom out. So for example, in this one, we definitely want to zoom out. Now, if I hit enter, you'll notice that it doesn't look like anything has changed, and that's because nothing has. What we need to do is we need to tell it a center point at which to zoom out. So if you need to move that cursor around a little bit and say, okay, I want the center point to be around here, or if you think it might be more to the left, then you want to move more to the left in order to get a good center point to zoom out from. So now I hit enter, and it zooms it out. Now you'll notice that this didn't do a great job of zooming out, because what it's doing is it's zooming out from both the x and the y-axis. But we know that we probably didn't need the x-axis to be zoomed out as well. All right, now I'm going to reset it. Now the quickest way to reset it to the original, what we call standard window from -10 to 10 and -10 to 10 for both x and y, is to hit zoom, and you'll see in this zoom menu there's an option that says Z standard. So I'm going to scroll down to Z standard, or you can hit 6 to get there. And this brings us back to what we originally had. Now, since we know that zooming out didn't quite work for us here, we can also adjust the window ourselves. Now, how do you know how to adjust the window? Well, take a look at what we have. We see where it crosses the x-axis pretty well, and we saw after we zoomed out, it didn't cross the x-axis anywhere else. So we probably don't need to change the x min and x max values. Right now the x min is at -10, the x max is at 10. Now the y values, on the other hand, we might need to change to be larger. So instead of -10, we might need to go more negative, and instead of +10, we have to go more positive. So let's look at the window. So click on window. We said we don't want to change the x min and x max, so we'll leave those the same. But the y min and y max we need to change. Now, how much do you change it by? Well, if you really don't understand what your graph looks like, you might need to try a couple of things. So for example here, if I say, okay, I'll try -20 and 20 and see if that's going to be enough. So now I go back to my graph, and that's definitely better, but it's still not quite enough. So maybe I need to change the window a lot more. So let's go back to changing the y min and y max. Let's say I make this -50 to +50. And then I hit graph. Now that's a much better picture. I still might want to change the window a little bit more. So really, when you are trying to get a good look at a function, you will probably need to play around with the window a little bit until you are able to see the function. So this really takes a little bit of practice, and it does take a little bit of trying stuff out and seeing what ends up happening. You can see here that's a much better graph. I could still change the y max to be a little bit higher so that we can actually see how this curves. Take a look at the graph now, and we can see that graph much better. Now, oftentimes, if you are changing the window and you're not careful, one of the error messages that you may see is that there is an issue with the window. So let's say I accidentally, when I changed this, I wanted it to be negative 100 to 100, but I accidentally changed it to 100 and 100. I forgot the negative. When you go to graph it, the error is going to say something is wrong with the window range, right? Because right now the calculator is looking at the window range that I gave, which was that the y-min and y-max went from 100 to 100. And since there's no way for it to graph any y values, right, from 100 to 100, well, there's nothing in between those two numbers. The other thing that may end up happening is if you accidentally switch your y-min and y-max. So if, for example, instead I put 100 here, and then I put negative 100 here. Now when you go and try to graph it, it's going to say it's an error with the window range. So let's take a look at that window again. So what we did here was we made y-min 100 and y-max negative 100. But we know that the y-min should be smaller than the y-max. So that's another case where you might end up with an error in the window range.